In this video, we're going to take a look at Frog.fm, which is a new framework for building Farcaster Frames. If you're not sure what Farcaster Frames are, I'm going to put a link to a previous video. I suggest you watch that first. Let's take a look at what we're going to be building. It's going to be a little meme generator. So a frame is kind of like a little interactive app that shows up right into your feed, into your social feed. It's going to look just like this, and you can interact with it right here. So you can pick a template for your meme, A or B. I'm going to choose B, and then it's going to do some work. It'll come back with the image, and then you can put in the text right here. Just say hello world. And you can generate your little meme. It's going to hit the server, and it's going to come back with a new image. Now this image, you can open it in a new tab. And this is what it looks like, and this is your meme. So you can kind of do a little meme generator, and then when you're done, you can start over, and then you can pick A, and then you can add more text in here, and then it'll add the text to the image, and you can save the image. Now we're going to use Frog.fm to build this because it's a nice framework, and it cuts out a lot of the extra meta tags that you have to write when you're doing frames. To get started, you can go to their website, and we're just going to do this Next.js installation, because I'm most familiar with Next.js. You want to open up your terminal and you want to paste that into there. And I'm going to call it Frog Next.js. And you cd into the Frog Next.js, and you do a run npm install. Alright, let's open this up in the code editor and take a look at what we got. If we look at the package.json, you can see that it is very lightweight. It's just going to install Next, React, Hano, and Frog. If you go to the page, you can tell that they're using the app router, and the page is kind of very standard. It's got the Vercel stuff in it, but the real meat and potatoes is this API/routes. So inside of here is some sample code. So you can see they make a new app from Frog, and they give it a base path of API because it's in this app router API folder. And then this is where you can start to construct your frame. Let's take a look at what they have here. You can do an npm run dev, and then open it up on localhost. Then there's a little link here you can click to get to your endpoint. And what's really nice about Frog is that it comes with this frame tester built in, and it's super nice. So this is the default. You can have these buttons, and then you can reset it, and you can add some text here. And these are all images that it generates. So if you pick on the oranges, you can open this in a tab. And since frames are basically OG images, these are all like images that generates. Perfect for a meme generator, I think. All right, so let's change this up to be our meme generator. We want to go in here, and for the image, you can see that you can actually just write some JSX and give it styling, which is super nice. And it'll convert all this JSX into an image, but we don't really need that. We actually want to start off with an image ourselves. To do that, we're going to go into the public folder, and I actually have an image pre-built right here. So this is the one, this is the initial image that they see where they can pick or A or B. I'm going to drag it into here. Okay, so now we have the image, and for this we can just say localhost 3000 /site preview.jpg. Alright, so let's see if that's gonna work. So you can come back to this little frame previewer, and you just reload it right here. You can see, boom, we have our new image now. So now we don't need all these buttons or this input text. We're gonna change that right now. I'm gonna delete some of this stuff. We just need two buttons. One is A, one is B. The value is going to be A. This value is going to be B. Alright. So we don't need this. Kind of don't need anything from the context, which is this C. So this is our initial frame. We're just going to show them the image, and they're going to pick A or B, right? Now what happens when they pick A or B, it's going to be an action right here. And this is going to go to, you can kind of call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it picker, because this is like the next step of the API that's going to happen. So they're going to hit A or B, and it's going to hit a picker one, like a new picker endpoint. And then we can kind of just copy this, go down here, and call this picker. And for picker, let's just see what happens real quick. I'm going to not have an action. We're going to have, and let's take a look at what is on the C. We go back here and change it. So now that we have those A or B buttons, and we can also take a look at our console log right here. All right, so when we hit A, and you can see there's a lot of information that comes from the C, or that context. It's like a frog context. You can see the button index, which is 1. You can see the button value, so that's the A. So you can either use the button index or the value. I'm going to use the value because that's a little easier. And then you can see there's this frame data right here. Everything in this frame data kind of doesn't mean anything right now because we're not really validating the frame yet. But eventually you will want to use what's in the frame data. So it looks like we want button value. We want to pull out button value from C. And if you hover over the C, you can see that there's button index, button value, things of that nature, right? So we want to pull out the button value. And we want to say if the button value is A, we're going to show the first meme. Otherwise, show the second meme. I'm actually going to copy some code so we go along a little faster. All right, and we're missing text input, which we can get from up here. So all these button components, they come from Frog. We click on A, it's going to go to picker and tell us that we picked on A. So if it's A, we're going to show a new image right here. We're going to show an image of A. And for the intents are basically a button or the text input, actionable items you can do. We're going to do a text input, so you can type in the text, and then we're going to have that generate button right here as well. So right now this /meme/A folder does not exist. We can kind of make that. We want to make a new folder called meme. Within that, make another new folder called A. And this is going to be the starting template for the A meme, right? I copy that and also copy this route over. And since we're here, I might as well copy B over as well. And I'm also going to copy this assets folder over because it has our font in there. We got that like meme looking kind of font. That's going to be copied into the root directory over here. So I'm going to copy all this stuff over here. And now we can take a look at meme A and what the route does. So what this endpoint does, it's essentially using Next.js, which is like a OG image generator. And since we're using Next.js, it's including the Vercel OG, which is where this is actually coming from. And if you're hosting this on Vercel, Vercel is going to generate those OG images for you. And what it's going to do is going to take in the search parameters, and it's going to pull out the text that you're typing in. So it has the text. We're going to find the text right here, and then we're going to translate this image. We're going to translate this image. We're going to translate that image into some image data, and then we're going to put it into an image tag right here. And then we're going to take that font, that Oswald bold, which is that meme looking font, and we're going to put that into a font data, and you can add that into the font area right here. So this is all copied from the ImageResponse API, which if you go to Next.js, they have all the documentation for that here. So I'm basically using this to generate those images, to generate my memes. So what's going to happen is you're going to hit the picker endpoint. It's going to see if you picked A or B from this previous step. And if it's A, it's going to give you, it's just going to hit this meme endpoint. And since we don't have any text entered at all, it's just going to simply translate this image, which is the base meme template, and serve it back up to you. This font data kind of doesn't really play a role right now. And there's just some CSS here to kind of get the text where you want it on that meme template. And there's some text shadow to give like the text that, meme-ish looking black outline. But since we don't have any new text, this is kind of not showing right now at all. So we can kind of copy the same thing, but for B if not A is selected. So all right, let's test that out right here. Looks like we got an error. We'll want to replace these environment variables with just localhost right now. When you go into production, you want to change it to environment variables. Let's give it a quick test. So we're on localhost API. If we pick B, it's going to give us that B image. So this is not really looking right. It's because on here, I think you can give it a image aspect ratio. We want to give it a 1:1. Right? Yeah. So let's try that again. Okay, so that's a 1:1 image aspect ratio. So now we can type in our text, but when we hit generate, nothing's going to happen. So now we'll need the next step after picker. We're going to show the initial frame, and it's going to just be that static image, and they can either pick A or B. Then it's going to hit the picker endpoint because it's action, and this picker endpoint is going to say, okay, did you pick A or B? If they picked A, show them the A template. The initial image is coming from here. If they picked anything else, in this case it'll be B, show them this image right here. And then once they put in the text and then they hit a button, it's going to hit this action endpoint, which currently does not exist. So let's make that right now. We'll do app.frame/meme. And then you can kind of do things like an ID. This ID right here is going to be either B, so this would be the ID of B, or the ID of A. And that's how we pass along, keep passing what they picked to the next endpoint. So we can actually pull off what ID they picked from the parameter of ID. And we can pull off the text value from right here, where the input text. So let's do a console.log of what the input text is. And we'll want to just return some dummy data. All right, let's see if we can get the input all the way here. Now let's also log what the ID is as well. All right. So if we start off in the beginning, okay, I'm going to pick A. Okay, so now it's giving me the A template. And if I type in some text and hit it again, all right, it's giving me that other image because of the filler response that we gave it. But we can see the ID is A and the input text is that gibberish we gave it. So now we can kind of do a similar thing. Say if ID equals A. We'll want to return an A image. But not only that, we'll want to pass along this input text. Text equals the input text. So the input text is going to go make it to these meme endpoints down here. And remember, this is where it reads that input text right here. So it's going to look for it as search parameters, which is the question mark text equals right here. This is where it's picking up that text, and then it's going to transfer it all the way into that image where it lives. Now there's actually a better way to do it, and I would recommend, instead of just using input text raw, we'll want to convert it into like a search parameter. And you can do that using this. So do a new URL search params. It's going to do some encoding and treat it as if it were in an actual URL. So I want to use that instead. And then we don't really need this text anymore because this text is going to show up here. All right. It's giving us a warning. What's it saying? So it doesn't like that input text could be undefined. Okay, so we'll just make it a default of string if it is undefined. And let's take a look at actually what search param is. Let's take a look at what this makes. All right, so hello. All right, so now basically it's working. That hello is making it onto the image. And you can see the input text, or the search param, is an object that has text hello. And when you tack it onto a string, it's going to be readable by this search params area right here. So everything's working. We just need like a start over button, right? We just need a button for them to start over. So they can both have that button. And for this one, I think we want this aspect ratio to be that 1:1 again. Because this is that square. B is that square aspect ratio. And you can just, to make it start over again, you can just do action back to the base. Basically take them all the way back to the initial frame, which is what we're going to do. So A, testing out frog. Okay, and if we do start over, all right, we're back to the initial frame, hit B, frog, generate right here, and we can start over. All right, that was basically it. So before we push this out to production, we'll want to change this localhost and make it like an environment variable. Because when you push it out to production, this is not going to be localhost 3000. So you want to make a new file. And for Next.js, it's going to be env.local. And we basically want to say next public site URL. And since we're on local, it's going to be a local host. When you push it out to Vercel, you'll want this to be whatever the actual published endpoint is. And we'll want to come back in here and change all these local hosts to be that process.env.nextPublic site URL. Make sure we don't have any errors. So right here, make sure these are little tick marks instead of the single quotes. You might need to rebuild it. You might need to rerun the npm run dev for this to work. Okay, everything's working. Start over. All right, so now we can push this to production. Now the last thing I'll note is that Frog makes it really easy to verify your frames. You can simply uncomment one of these hubs. And what verification means that right now, these are all just unverified. So this text input is not verified. It can basically be spoofed. And what you want to do is use verified information. So you want a user who is actually signed into their Farcaster and Warpcast. Whenever they click or interact with the frame, there's extra verification data that gets passed along. And you want to use that instead of just this unverified information. And to do that, you want to simply activate a hub. So I'm going to use this Pinata hub right here. If you import Pinata from Frog hubs, so now the localhost is not going to work anymore, because on localhost, we're not really connected with Farcaster or any of the real user data. So it's going to say the signature is invalid. I'm going to show you what I mean right now. This is where you're going to see message is invalid, invalid signer. Now that's happening because we added a hub, or our localhost is not signed into Farcaster. I think you can sign in to Farcaster using this little icon up here. And this will kind of sync your Farcaster ID with this localhost environment, and then this will work. Or you can use something like ngrok, and it will push your localhost server up into like the real web, and then you can go and test that on the Warpcast developer frames. Then you can actually test that here. But basically, once you activate the hub, it makes everything more secure, but it makes local developing a little more painful. But then you can get something like this. You can get verified off of the context. And you can say, okay, if it's verified, then do all this stuff. You can say only do all this stuff if it's verified. Otherwise, you can just say something like it's an invalid user and you want to try it again. And for the input text, we don't really want to pull it off directly off of C. We'll want to pull it off of frameData right here. See how it has frameData? So instead of pulling it off of input text, we want to do frameData and then see if they're verified. And then input text is going to be pulled off of frameData right here. I think we're going to default this to string, and it's saying input text does not exist on frameData. All right, so that's going to fix that. And we can do something the same way. If it's verified, then do all this action. Otherwise, we'll just say you have an invalid user. So pulling the input text off of frameData is a lot more secure. I mean, this is a meme generator, so it kind of doesn't really matter for this example. You don't really need it to be verified for memes. But if you're doing something like collecting emails or doing the new transaction frames, you're going to want to definitely put in an actual hub so that it verifies all the signatures. And that's the example. Let me know if that was helpful. Keep in mind that Farcaster Frames is very new and Frog is very new as well, so it's constantly changing. The developers are very fast adding new things, and Farcaster Frames also introducing new things, so things could break. All this is very beta-ish, I would say. Don't be surprised if something doesn't work. Go into the Frog GitHub, see what issues they have, update to the latest version often so you get the latest and greatest. Give this video a thumbs up if you thought it was helpful and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.